My name's John Cassimer. I'm not going to speak too much today. It's about these four people. They're the people you've come here to see. But I do want to just put some parameters down before we start, because we had a meeting the other day to talk about what we didn't want to talk about in this room today. So we wanted to try to narrow the discussion of this down to a focus that will deliver something we hope will be of value to everybody in the room. We don't want this to devolve into an is the agency model broken debate, which seems to happen all over the place in this industry and never actually generate very much light, just a lot of heat. And we don't want it to come down necessarily to a can one agency do it all kind of discussion either, for exactly the same reason. It just ends up as a circle jerk. We don't want this to be about agency grandstanding, about one person just trying to sell their agency while somebody else tries to sell theirs. We want it to be a discussion about how everybody, not just the four people here, but everybody in this room can hopefully navigate the industry that we're already in. So what's the backstory to the discussion? Well, there is a kind of vaguely defined set of problems that people see when they look at the world at the moment, or the media world at the moment, or you could view them as challenges. Finding the right people for the right job, the people who will deliver the right message to the right channels which deliver meaningful engagement to the well-targeted consumers, engagement which then translates into sales. I think that's a pretty straightforward formula. Obviously pretty easy, but on top of that, you've also got the problem of managing all the people involved to deliver the message, which is becoming increasingly complex and costly, thanks to the investments that are required across the multiple channels. So what we're going to try and do with this panel is help everybody try and do those things a little bit better. And we're doing that by bringing together perspectives from a major client, a big agency, an established independent specialist, and a new startup with big agency experience. So I'd like you to welcome, please, I'll run through the forum, Rowena Millwood, who's the Senior Director of Integrated Communications and Digital Consumer Asia, Johnson & Johnson. Aaron Michie, who is Chief Innovation Officer at Zenith Optimedia. Clive Bircham, who's the founder of the Conscience Organisation, and Damien Damjanovski, founder of Common Ventures.
Damien.
Close? Yeah. Perfect. Close, Damien D. And we'll just go straight into questions. I would hopefully like my questions, but I want to get to questions from you guys as soon as we can, but we'll start up on stage. Aaron, first of all, has anything really actually changed in marketing? Everybody keeps going on about the change in marketing. Has anything really actually changed? Is there a problem here, or do people just think there's a problem?
Oh, yes, from my perspective, I think obviously things have changed. We're all going to talk about complexity, fragmentation, how to prove ROI out of all these channels, but that's kind of a bit boring to go on about that, because that's the standard issue. I think what the real issue and the real thing that's changed is we don't really know as clients, as agency people, maybe I'll be a client one day, but as agency people, how to charge for what we do. Like the whole, panorama of things we have to deliver now is quite different, but we're still getting paid based on a model that was set up, I don't know, God knows how long ago, back in the 1960s or earlier. So I think that to me is the real problem, not just because things have become more fragmented and complex, but we don't know how to get paid, I think, correctly for the new sort of skills that we're being asked to do. Anyone else has got a point of view on that?
Clive?
I'd have to agree. I empathise with clients as much as I empathise with my financial controller, in that for people like Rowena and most of our clients, they have to pay for a lot of the different people to do a lot of different things. So I think that's tough. And then likewise on the other side, you've got the pressures with an FMCG of Coles and Woolworths, which, what's it called, cliffing or edging, where they push clients to donate more money to their marketing funds, as well as bringing home brands, which places further pressure. So you have a media pressure, which Aaron spoke to. You've got a remuneration pressure, and then you've got ultimately, I guess, what's a sales pressure. So don't know what the solution is, other than we all ultimately will be smarter, wiser, and faster, which for an individual, I think, becomes tougher, because you've got to take time out for you and your family, etc. So it's a big problem.
Aaron, could that be your problem, that you're simply not explaining well enough to your clients what it is that you do and what it costs?
Yeah, perhaps. I also I think clients, I guess, they also don't know how to ask for the right services sometimes. Like we get paid, my experience in creative agencies, you'll get paid to deliver something, to make an ad, to make a piece of content. And you might get charged, or you charge the client in the same way. It's based on head hours. those kind of things. But the head hours required to make a TVC are very, very different to think through and plan a socially driven mobile application type thing. Yet the head hour costs are the same. The skills that we need to deliver those types of things are completely different. Very, very different people, very, very different requirements and expectations, but we're all sort of charging the same way as we did for a account service person, a planner, copywriter, art director. That's the kind of basic mix. And that just doesn't cut it anymore from my perspective. And trying to explain that to a client, we have to change our whole remuneration model. That's quite a difficult conversation to have. And I think also from the media perspective as well, now that on media side, we get the same sort of agency head hours as we do to plan a TV campaign. And that's really simple. You know, it's a bit of a negotiation, go to lunch a bit, have a bit of a good time, and then you sort of buy and plan your spots. It's quite simple. It takes X amount of time. But clients want to push a lot more into digital. There's a lot more thinking, a lot more media negotiations to go on, a lot more partners, a lot more executions, a lot more time to spend with the creative agencies, digital agencies. But still, the pressure or the interest to get into digital is because it's cheaper. So there's pressure on head hours to go down or them to be cheaper as well, but actually it requires more from us. So there's a real imbalance, I think, in what clients are willing to pay for and what they expect and what we're sort of able to deliver based on what we're getting paid for. I think it's quite a fundamental problem there.
Rowena, you obviously don't represent all clients, you represent one client. And, but how do you deal with an issue like that? Are you under pressure from the global chain that's above you to pay everybody on a particular framework?
Yeah, I mean, I do empathise entirely, because I think you've got the way we used to do things, and you know, within J&J we talk about things as either best practice or a next practice. And best practice are the things that we've done for years and years, and so it is really about that baseline and maybe how do we get a cost improvement or tweak it, but it is very much around how we've always done things. Whereas if you look at a next practice, it hasn't been worked out entirely, or it's still transforming, it's still morphing. And I think the challenge for everyone is that balance between a best practice and next practice is shifting. So there's more around next practice, but our remuneration models are all based around a best practice. And so I think really what's required is, rather than going straight into scope of work or execution or fee or whatever the approach is, to actually step back and say, okay, well, how do we start to think about not only our best practice remuneration model, but our next practice remuneration model? And I think that will look different by client.
I agree.
Damien?
I think it's a fascinating issue, and I think it comes down to it's kind of a matter of perspective, right? Is everyone's aware of the issues, the forces that are kind of compressing in on the current market conditions. We don't need to talk about them. Hopefully everyone here knows them. But we all still view how we work as a service, which is quite interesting, because when you take out any individual piece of work that we do, it's generally not actually a service we're providing. We're providing a product. So we're being essentially commissioned to provide a product to a client that they're then going to integrate into either their brand or help them do X, Y, or Z. Now, when you're creating a product, for each product you assess what the revenue model is for it. But because we're stuck in this kind of model where it's, as Aaron kind of mentioned, time and materials, the only way we know how to bill is time and materials, so we just keep on billing, even though we might have thousands of opportunities to produce, these amazing digital, integrated, traditional products, but change the revenue model. There's no rule to say that, hey, I mean, how many people here are client side? Sorry, there's a show of hands, clients. How many of you have an e-commerce solution? There's a couple of you. So, I mean, an e-commerce solution will cost you what, 100 grand, let's say, minimum? Would that be your experience? And you pay 100 grand for this e-commerce solution that you're paying to an agency. There's no rule to say that agency can't go, actually, we'll provide it to you for 10 grand, but we're going to keep the transaction fee on all of your transactions and act as your merchant. There's nothing stopping that, but we just don't think that way. And it's especially obviously harder as a larger client, because you have all the internal politics that you need to, and all the internal hurdles of, legal, your financial controllers and all that you need to kind of convince to essentially take a risk on different revenue models.
Aaron, you mentioned, to use that phrase again, time and materials. It's a really interesting way of looking at what people do for a living. Is there a problem here that certain kinds of activities may require more time and more materials but have less return?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also to Damien's point, I think I agree part of the time, because a lot of the industry is about making a product, as we get more and more into the digital world, I guess. But a lot of agency side work is really service. I mean, like media, for example, we spend most of our time, negotiating with media on behalf of clients. We don't actually make anything at the end of that. There is no product apart from the output of our negotiations. So it's an interesting thing to have it product-led. But yeah, some activities they are really, really resource intensive, but they deliver very, very low return. I mean, for example, planning and buying and booking digital media, it's really, really complex, and it takes a lot of time to get through it, but the margin return is tiny compared to booking one spot. But we have to charge the same, one spot on TV, we got to charge the same head hours both times, or actually even charge less for digital. So we get stuck in a interesting, I guess, wedge there.
Rowena, as a client, how often will you choose an agency based on the price?
Generally within J&J, it's not the primary criteria. And I would say because it's more about long-term relationship and understanding the brands and the consumer, relationship that we're looking to build. Having said that, it still is an important consideration. So it's not something that's ignored. We do benchmarking, we have global procurement, like I'm sure a lot of clients do. And so, I would say it is important, but I always think of it as cost is what you pay, but value is what you get. And I think in the current environment with the complexity, the need for, finding more innovative solutions and connecting with the consumer in different ways, that value is what we really need to be thinking about. And that's not always reflected in a straight cost spreadsheet, which I think is what Aaron's saying as well.